name is Mark Banish, and I'm President and Chief Scientist of Neoterracon, a consultancy located here in Bedford, New Hampshire, that deals with nanotechnology and nanomaterials. Recently, a lot of my clients have been asking me about laboratory notebooks. You know, those repositories of information, data, hypotheses, musings, all about anything that has to do with the company's discoveries, its development of intellectual property, products, and even just plain old recognition for their intellectual efforts. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the basics of good laboratory notebook keeping. I'll be highlighting the types of things that should go in a laboratory notebook, how those things should be recorded, what to do if you make mistakes, all the things that are necessary to just keep a good lab notebook that meets all the goals that are needed for your company to get that desired patent, protect that trade secret, or as I've said, just get that plain old-fashioned recognition.
Now in this video, when I refer to a laboratory notebook, I'll be referring to one of these, a traditional bound edition of blank paper pages upon which you record your entries by hand. Some prefer using electronic versions of these, but I advocate for the older style since it slows you down a little bit, gives you time to think about what you're actually writing down, to consider the implications. Plus, no one ever hacked one of these, nor did they ever lose its password. What goes into your laboratory notebook can best be understood by remembering the purpose of your laboratory notebook, which is to serve as a permanent record of everything around your ideas, from their theoretical underpinnings all the way to their practical applications. And also in that respect, anything that supports or denies any part of that work also needs to be included. Finally, it's also good to make sure that people understand that other people may have contributed and to note their contribution. What's important also is what doesn't go into the lab notebook. These would include things that are dishonest, corrupt, disreputable, pointless, irrelevant, insulting, illegal, or disingenuous. None of these have any place in a good lab notebook. Remember, this may one day be supporting your work in court, so you want to be as objective as possible. But perhaps more important than these other restrictions is this one: nothing without context or reference. Here's a perfect example of what is meant by nothing without context or reference. Here's a collection of what looks to be experimental data. But of what? What's sample 1? What's sample 2, 3, 4, or 5? What are they made up of? Where did you get them? How did you formulate them? Did you formulate them? Did you buy them? Weight? Why record the weight? Why record the time? And what is effective power? Where does any of this information come from? What does it mean? What is its context? Otherwise, this information is just pointless, vague, obtuse, useless. When you do write something down, it has to be put there permanently. Therefore, ink is the preferred medium, and it doesn't matter whether you use an inexpensive disposable pen or an expensive fountain pen. Just don't use a pencil. If it can be erased, don't use it. When you do record something in the lab notebook, make sure you lay it out with plenty of space. It makes it easy to read. And also, to make things easy to read, write legibly. If your cursive isn't that great, use block letters like I'm doing here. And also, if you record any data or information that has units of measure associated with it, record those units of measure. That's extremely important not only to establish context, but if you have to do calculations later, that's a lifesaver. Of all the things to record in a lab notebook, perhaps the most overlooked is the materials and equipment section. Now, back in college, you probably prepared lab reports, and in the lab reports, there was always a section listing the materials, the chemicals, the equipment, the tools you used in order to get the work done. Well, it's the same thing here. only in a greater level of detail. If you buy chemicals from a particular vendor, list the vendor, list the part number, list the purity grade, and if necessary, list the price. If you're using specialized tools, do the same thing. And if you're using equipment to gather data, it's extremely important to list not only what type of equipment you're using and what type of sensitivities or detection abilities it has, but also any particular settings or calibrations or standards used on that equipment in order to get it to give you the data that it gave you. All of this information is necessary because, remember, you're trying to record information specifically associated with reproducing your work. You have to be able to have the information in there so that someone, maybe years from now, can come along, get your lab notebook, and replicate your work exactly. So that's why this section is so important, and this is why perhaps this one is the most detailed of all. Outside items can be added to the notebook by just following a few simple rules. First, the item must be secured to the notebook page. I'm doing that here with a piece of double-sided tape. Next, the item must be secured to the page in such a way that removal is difficult. For that reason, I often use a simple staple. Finally, the object must be marked to indicate where it was on the page, so if it's removed, people can see it. I do that by drawing some lines across it as indicated here, followed by a simple initial. Of course, all outside sources have to be referenced. This includes listing the authors, publication, publication date, page number. With respect to format, I refer you to the Chicago Manual of Style, which now has an online tool and will do the citation for you. Now here's a topic that causes some people more than a little bit of anxiety. What happens if you make a mistake? What happens if you write down the wrong number or produce a bad calculation, write down the wrong name for something, or even simply misspell it? Well, the simple thing and the correct thing to do is what I'm doing here. Simply cross it out. Cross it out thoroughly so people understand that this really is a correction, and then write the correction next to it. If you'd like, you can initial where you did the crossing out to show people that it was indeed you who caught the error. When you're finished with a page, it's a good idea to fill the empty spaces with some sort of scribble or doodle. This will prevent others from returning and adding to the page without your knowledge and without your consent. And now we come to our final topic, witnessing and signatures. It is vitally important that you sign off on your lab notebook entries on a regular and prompt basis. This is necessary, of course, in order to establish when you actually did your work. But it's also important that you have a peer witness your work as well as date it. This peer will have a similar understanding of your work to you and will be able to demonstrate to the outside world that they comprehended the meaning and importance of what you did. That concludes this overview of the basics of good lab notebook keeping. I hope you found it informative, and if you have any questions, you can email me at the address shown here on the screen. And with that, I'll leave you the words of my high school chemistry teacher who said, "Mark, if you're in doubt, write it down."